would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Many things to dive into. One thing I will be diving into, the USS John S. McCain being hit. I'll get into that, and that kind of will come after I talk about Trump's new Afghan strategy that he has and what I believe about what's going on there. But first, I want to go ahead and dive into this Ron Paul Liberty Report talking about Trump and Afghanistan. And we'll cover that first, and we'll move into the ship being hit by the oil tanker. And this is going to expand into kind of more of a web of things we're dealing with right now, and how this Afghan strategy, probably not the best time for this, and actually I really believe that this is going to harm us in many ways. But this is a war that people that started fighting this war at the very beginning now have kids that could potentially be fighting that same war. And that's a scary thought, that this war has gone on this long, and to see how far away from declaring war, ending a war, we've come from, and why I don't think we have the capable people to actually end a war. But let's go ahead and dive into this Ron Paul Liberty Report first.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine, and restless night last night. I had to listen to a speech that did not make me happy.
You did a little tweeting last night, too, didn't you?
Yeah, a little bit. All fun and games, though. And I know you watched it because we were working together. You type faster than I do. I can talk fast, but I can't type fast. So, but no, we did a little bit of that, and it keeps you on your toes. And I think we had some good responses from it. And people want to know. But today we want to do some more reassessing. Do we have to backtrack? Can we all of a sudden change our tune this morning and say, hey, it wasn't all that bad. It's the same old stuff. At least he didn't order the bombing of Moscow or something like that. And he didn't declare war against China. So and we haven't invaded North Korea yet. And maybe he didn't even mention Iran. Maybe he's getting soft on Iran. Who knows what? But basically, I just want to go over a little bit and dissect this out. Obviously, both you and I have not had too much pleasure in listening to or believing there's much good in there. And like our title of our program on the program today is, it's more of the same. And ultimately, the goal is to protect the empire. But I think the political bottom line that really is going to cause the chaos is that the deep state won, and Trump really has told us where he stands. And I think when Bannon was let go, when he left, we knew that would happen. So this, my first reaction to the political ramifications of this, the deep state won, and that they are very, very powerful to be able to do this. And because, Trump at the beginning of his speech says, this is what I believed in, and, this is what I would hope for, but I had to change my mind when reality said it. The reality might be, and you might comment on that, the reality is that I can't be president very long. These people are tough, and you got to know how to make a deal. And it's almost like he had to make a deal because the deep state is powerful, and they they control the media. Just look how they distorted things on the domestic conflicts that go on. So who knows? I can't believe that he had a change of heart. Some people say it is flip-flopping, but unfortunately we don't believe he has a firm philosophic base, so it makes him maybe easier. But it's definitely a different Trump from his campaign, and it has annoyed his base. And quite frankly, I think him coming over won't solve the problem. The neocons are ecstatic. I predict that they're not going to be happy 6 months or a year from now, because who knows what's going to happen. I think both sides are going to be unhappy with him.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about the deep state. Here's a great little quote from Foreign Policy writing about Trump coming up with his new strategy. And this is the issue you've talked about so many times, surrounding himself with generals. That's why he's so proud of it. They said that the president kept telling McMaster on Afghanistan, go back to the drawing board. I want something new. Go back to the drawing board. But he kept coming back with the same plans. So
and finally
he capitulated. He said last night, my original instinct was to pull out. But things look different from this side of the desk at the Oval Office.
Okay, but don't you think the saying putting lipstick on a pig might be about what he was trying to do? I don't imagine he's achieved it that much. It still looks ugly. And it means that Trump has gone a long way from what he has said in the past, because there was a time when he thought we had already spent too much money and spent too much time.
Matter of fact, we have a tweet that we resurrected that Trump said, wow, Ron Paul is right. We're wasting trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan. People would think that he flip-flopped again until you read the fine print back from 2011.
Oh, 2011. How did I manage not being on his team?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess that tells you something.
But he said there are 3 conclusions that he made that changed his minds. And I thought maybe we could have a little bit of fun, I guess is not the word for it, breaking down each one to show how wrong they are. The first one, we must seek an honorable and enduring outcome that is worthy of the military sacrifices thus far.
Yes, this came up, during the presidential debates because I wanted to get the troops out of the Middle East, out of Iraq, the whole works. And but the argument put up to me, I think it was Huckabee that put it up to me in a strong way. But then you'd have to admit they all died in vain. Possibly so. That possibly so. But having more people die for a lost cause isn't going to bring these other people's lives back. But I did try to put a positive spin on that by saying, well, nobody wants to die in vain. But maybe it won't be quite so bad if we learn a lesson. If we could learn the lessons of the failure of our foreign policy and why there are terrorists out there anxious to do us harm and why we have lost so much and spent so much, maybe we could say, well, we woke up. We really didn't wake up. We were waking up a little bit after Vietnam, but not much. But how many people can brag about, well, I sacrificed this, my left leg, and my son gave up his life, but we saved liberty by spending all that money and killing 1 million Vietnamese and 60,000 Americans? It's just lying to themselves, because it's sort of, I think the problem is the difficulty in looking like you're not patriotic, that you don't love your country. And that is overwhelming, because that is what Goring said. You play on that and you can get anybody to do anything if you say that you're unpatriotic and you don't support your country. And that seems to be the case. So they're able to twist that around if you don't support the troops by sending in more troops, continuing the same policy. You'd think after 16 years, the American people at least in the 60s got tired of it before 16 years. Of course, a lot more people were being killed, but a lot of people are being killed in these wars that we're involved in. Maybe not as many Americans, but it still is devastating. But they just keep throwing the same policy out again. Just like you said, McMaster keeps coming back, the same old policy.
Well, the second faulty conclusion that he cited to change his opinion, he said the consequences of a pullout are predictable and unacceptable. A hasty exit would create a vacuum to be filled by terrorists. And then later he said, just like what happened in Iraq.
Yeah. After we went in and disrupted the whole country, it got filled up. But what they don't understand is when they use our military and our effort to try to force them to live a certain way goes in, that breeds terrorists. And that's where the problem comes from. So if you have these problems, you send in more troops or perpetuate it, you're more likely to have terrorists. But, I think that the word terrorist is, so carelessly used, because terror is, just a tactic. A terrorist, there's a lot of them. It was, there's a lot of them out there. And there's a lot of people who will do violence to us. And that's what the real problem is that we create them by our policies, but you can't say it because you sound like you're unpatriotic, and they say you can't pull out. Well, I think you can. I think you can pull out. And one of the analogies I think we might have even mentioned last night was we finally had to pull out of Vietnam. Yeah. We finally pulled out, and better things came of it all. But this argument that you can't pull out, and presidents never want to lose a war. LBJ was determined that was one of his big reasons for escalating. We can't be seen as ever losing a war. So the people that are worried about terrorists, they say that the American people are with this because they're really, really terrified of being killed by a terrorist. But that isn't true. There's statistics to show that isn't even high on their agenda. Yeah. 67% of the American people say that we're sick and tired of these wars. And I often wondered, if you did a real poll of tens of thousands of people in this country and ask them in a very sincere manner, do you know of anybody that has been killed or injured or a family broken up or a consequence of these wars that have been going on for 15 years, I think you would find a lot of people. And I think it was a factor, in the last election because Trump's policies were different. But then following up and asking the question, how many of you have met a family or talked to a family that has lost a loved one from a terrorist who arrived here from another country? Yeah. What are the numbers of that? Aren't they minuscule? Minuscule. And yet the whole thing of it is, it's this terrorizing the American people by building up this unrealistic fear And I can think of a lot of other things that they ought to be worrying about. Maybe they ought to worry about the Fourth Amendment in this country, or a few other things that affect our liberties, rather than, constantly using the propaganda machine, which is part of the deep state and especially the media, and they just pump out the information, and they may not get the people to really believe. At least the people just throw up their hands and go along with it. And of course, we want to be safe. That's the government's job to make us safe.
Well, the irony in Afghanistan is similar to the irony in Syria, because the U.S. is essentially fighting on the side of ISIS, even though the justification for being there is ISIS, because ISIS came to Afghanistan to fight the Taliban. Well, we spent the last 16 years fighting the Taliban. Now all of a sudden said we have to fight ISIS too. Well, the two of them are fighting as well. So, the third fallacy that Trump pointed out as the basis of his conclusion, you touched on it already, but he said the security threats we face in Afghanistan are immense. There are 20 terrorist groups in the area. And that reminds me of the fear-mongering that Obama did when he wanted to go into Syria. You remember, the Khorasan group, all of the things we've never heard since then talked about, but at the time they were built up. So that's his third, I think, mistake in conclusion.
You can't define the enemy.
Yeah.
Terrorism is a tactic. There are 20 groups who practice this thing of killing people, needlessly. You don't even know what it is. And that was the other thing about this policy. What's the exit policy? We used to hear that when I was in office. Well, they haven't given us an exit strategy. That came up a few times before they even went into Iraq. What is going to be the exit strategy? But they didn't pursue it because there is no exit strategy. There is no victory. And especially now, the victory will even be more vague. Well, we're not over there to occupy the country and have nation building. We're over there. What are we over there for? Oh, kill people.
Kill terrorists.
Kill terrorists. Well, where are the terrorists coming from? Well, they're coming all the time. Their numbers are growing because we're over there. But do the people wake up? I am convinced, though, and this is what we have mentioned before, is that the American people are waking up and they know darn well what's happening. And I don't think for a minute, if the American people just had facts on the table and said, what do you think the solution is? And whether you should just send more troops and pursue this endless no-win war or just bring our troops home. I think it would be higher than 67%. I can't imagine, other than, a few people who want to follow McCain and Graham and Rubio, that might stick to their guns and say, no, what we need is more troops. Just think, I think it was up to 500,000 they sent to this little country of Vietnam.
Yeah.
It didn't work. And we had an escalation under Obama. It didn't work. It's always because they leave too soon.
Leave too soon. That's
and of course, Trump said, we're not going to leave too soon.
Yeah.
That should scare you.
That's the only thing I say is great new strategy. The only thing new about it is he admitted we're no longer going to count what success looks like. We're going to discard all that old stuff. He says, we're not talking about numbers of troops or our plans for further military activities. Conditions on the ground, not arbitrary timetables, will guide our strategy from now on. So we're no longer going to say what we're going to do. We're not going to tell our enemy. We're not going to tell Congress even, certainly not the American people. We're just going to be there.
But who did he raise up to the level of running things? The generals. The generals have good training. And if we had the Nazis or the Japanese army attacking us, maybe some good generals would really help it. But that's not it. The generals are taking over to the point where they are deciding. And that, of course, came up once in our debates. And some other candidates said, well, we should always defer to the generals. Listen to the generals. They are the experts. They're not the experts in philosophy and what diplomacy is all about. And staying on a war involves diplomacy. But no, they just said that we'll let the generals. What Trump is saying now is let the generals decide, and that's even more removed from it. But it's part of the secrecy thing, and it's a part to protect Trump. Because, if Trump makes a decision on each one and goes badly, then he gets blamed. It's sort of the way Congress, remember how Congress would want to avoid, we really don't want to declare a war. Why don't we let the president assume all the responsibility? But I think the emphasis on the generals is out of proportion. And if you want to just deal with the military, all we have to do is talk about who has the most powerful military in the world. and everybody knows that we have the most powerful, bigger than all the rest put together. Nobody's going to attack us in a serious manner. This is all about our empire and our occupation to control things financially and militarily.
You know, I think part of what the president said was delusional. He said, we will break terrorists. We will break the terrorists' will. We will dry up their recruitment. Well, it's kind of too bad that that General Flynn is out, because you remember Flynn was quoted in The Intercept a few months ago, or I guess last year, saying the drones that we're using over there to kill terrorists are actually creating more terrorists than they kill. So too bad Flynn wasn't around to...
You know, and they've said that, there's articles out this morning that said the Trump base is unhappy.
Yeah.
The one thing they've been saying up until now is the base is solidly with him. So that's probably still up for grabs, because we do know that when the early stages of the Tea Party movement, we were sort of involved in that, but then it morphed into a more Republican thing, and they didn't like the foreign policy. So Trump is sort of in the middle of that. But I know there are a lot of people, because it was inviting to some libertarian-leaning individuals to say, hey, you know, maybe Trump's okay, as we had hoped for.
The rhetoric sounds good.
Yeah, you know, that we were going to have a different attitude toward Russia. But the base is probably being annoyed, at least the base that said that America first. You know, most people who understand about America first and populism, it is a different foreign policy.
Yes.
It isn't pacifism, but it's different. They just as soon protect our borders and have our troops at home and not be fighting these wars. So there may be an uprising from the base, but I don't think he's going to pick up the support from Graham's group and the other neocons. The neocons aren't ever going to like him. Matter of fact, most of the people in the Republican leadership, they're not even going to come over, even though they're part of this pressure to get Trump to capitulate, or bad things could happen. I just think that he's in a mess, I think, politically speaking, because he lacks a philosophy. And even if the others didn't have a solid philosophy, they usually pretended they did. You know, I am going to take care of you from cradle to grave, and everything is going to be free. So people have seen it sort of tag on to things like that.
Yeah, and, you know, the Moon of Alabama had a good summary of essentially this new plan. Undefined goals, undefined troop limits, undefined time limits, bash Pakistan. That's it, the summary of the whole thing. And the bashing Pakistan is not going to work that well, because it was tried before. You know, they tried to withhold the money that we give their military, bribe their military every year. We do that so that we can supply our troops.
Or we have to depend on Russia.
Yeah.
To get the troops.
We've already messed up the Russia thing, so that's out of the question. We can't use that. If we push Pakistan, they'll say, okay, you can't supply your troops. Then what do we do?
Oh, for the difficulties of running an empire. You know, what a shame. Do you want to give a final statement here as we close down?
Well, first, I do want to remind everyone about our conference.
Oh,
next
yes.
month. Every day
We're going to solve the problems there, all right?
This is the reason that we're holding this conference. These kinds of issues are the reasons why we have to get together, discuss this, to show the flag. We're here and we're debating the real issues. The other thing I would say, and this is going to sound probably crazy, but really the best hope for Afghanistan is for the Taliban to win. They'll wipe out Al-Qaeda. They'll wipe out ISIS. The Taliban have never threatened the United States. They've never tried to attack us. The only thing they did that got them 16 years of war is they allowed Al-Qaeda to set up a camp, supposedly, on their territory. So if we want the Afghanis to leave us alone, the best to hope for is the Taliban to take over.
Oh, yeah, but there'd be one danger in that. That might put a damper on the drug trade, since everybody's relying on the drug trade. But the Taliban isn't necessarily pro-drug trade when they have more control.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
No, I think this is very serious trouble. I don't think there's a significant change. Politically, there's lots of things going on as a consequence of this speech, but policy is the same. They're not shifting gears. They're not bringing troops home. They're going to continue to spend money. It's more vague than ever. Nobody knows at the end point. Nobody knows who's running things, because things are going to be more secret. The war isn't shrinking. The war is really moving over into Pakistan. And one reason why that bothers me is the fact that we're really, really working hard to try to get the Indians to help us and that means there will be more antagonism between India and Pakistan. They both have nuclear weapons. So our interference and intervention overseas is not a good idea for a lot of reasons. And if we're concerned, as we are, about peace and prosperity, we would all argue for the case of a non-interventionist foreign policy, and I believe that is the answer. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, it was mentioned, this is just the same old strategy. Look at the generals that are up there. Do any of them actually know how to finish a fight? Finish a war? Of course not. These generals, they're not inventive, creative. They are the generals that read a book on war and are trying to copy what they read. That would have been like during the Revolutionary War, the Americans trying to fight the way the British were fighting. Which at times they actually tried that and it just didn't quite work out. But they found a way that did. It wasn't conventional. It was creative. It was, inventive. Not, complicated or anything, but for a military engagement at that period in history, that was something different. We don't have that right now from the leaders of the military. We know what our military is capable of doing. And we know that for what our military is capable of doing, we should have been out of Afghanistan, Iraq, in the whole Middle East by now. That's why it really further backs the fact that this is money for the military-industrial complex. They don't want wars to end. They rather make money off keeping wars overseas than seeing a war ever come to the shores, but they're naive in the fact that they don't think that blowback will ever get big enough to hit them. I hope it doesn't, because that means we're all in trouble, but eventually, like every other empire, we stretch ourselves too thin. Engaging 4,000 more troops in Afghanistan is not the answer, because you can't have entry strategy without the exit strategy. You have to have a goal that you're going in there to achieve. We'll go in there and kill terrorists. Okay, I'm going to kill some, and then we're going to have more. Then I'm going to kill some more, and we're going to have more. And hopefully, I don't die in the process. That's not a good strategy. The problem is, too, they won't ever be happy unless they have a puppet government that can withstand and control population and its borders. Well, Afghanistan, Iraq, these countries, they're not like America. They're not like Europe. They're not like Asia. They're unique. And to be able to control population, you need a dictator. But then a lot of those dictators also realize that, hey, you can always team up with the U.S. until they're done with you, and then you become the next target. Or you're done with them, and then you become the next target. Which, again, only amps up the blowback from all this military engagement. And to kind of segue into the USS McCain being hit, we keep stretching ourselves thinner and thinner and thinner. We're all around the world. We're doing navigation, freedom of navigation, routes out in the China Sea. What happens when we're so worried about what's going on everywhere around the world and having to be on high alert, low alert, high alert? Oh no, this and that. We start forgetting things. We start getting lazy. We've had 4 ships that have been hit. I seen on another TV program, they showed the route of one of the ships that got hit, and the ship that hit it, I want to say it was Fitzgerald. But if you look at the ship that hit it, this ship was dead set on a course. Then all of a sudden, halfway through its course, out of nowhere, it does a 180, starts heading right back towards our U.S. ship. It hits our ship, then it kind of staggers, and then right back on course to where it was going originally, which is opposite direction. It literally had to turn around, hit our ship, and then go back. Then we had this latest incident. There's something going on and we're not being told. But this is why we shouldn't also be flexing our power around the world. One, we leave our home soil at risk. 2, we give every other country, whether it be ally or non, the ability to see a lot of what we have. We should have very little military around the world. Just enough to know what's going on around the world, and be able to maybe act when needed. But we should have a lot more of our troops and our equipment closer to home. What I think has happened here which I've heard that they've denied this already, but I that could just be because they don't want people knowing or other countries knowing. But I think their automatic systems are being taken over, whether it be our military ships, other domestic ships, both, or there can be jamming of some sort of the systems, not allowing it to detect. And this also can be a test. If they realize that they can start getting other ships to ram ours with no real repercussion, it's not like, this ship's starting to, come right at us, come right at us. It's a military ship. In a time of war, it probably would fire. But because we're not in a declared war with anyone, and probably a good thing it did fire, because I doubt those people that are on that ship knew what was going on. But there's definitely something fishy. You don't have this happen. A lot of these systems are all automated. You've seen, fishing or other programs with ships. Other ships start getting close or on a path to intersect. You get a little warning going on. There's something fishy going on. And we have a lot of uncertainty going on in America right now. And I'm not sure if we could handle economic turmoil along with global problems. So sending 4,000 troops to Afghanistan is probably not a good idea to do right now. Give me a second here. Now, with Bannon out of the president's administration now, it seems that Trump is now surrounded by the establishment. And with this going to war in Afghanistan, it seems that he has given it, pivoted. Except for his speech in Arizona, which kind of throws you for a loop. Maybe it was more of a campaign speech or promise. Way to entice his base. Now I want to get into this clip if I can get it pull up here. Give me a second. listen on and play with this. Okay. This one from We Are Change. Trump's pivot that will bring on end of U.S. empire. So I'm going to play this clip and we're going to go over this real quick from We Are Change.
Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. And just a reminder, here at We Are Change, we confuse a lot of people. But we're here mainly to make you think and question your reality and ultimately look at the evidence we're providing so you can make up your own mind. And I guess if you could pinpoint our philosophy, it would be to question everything. And we are a fully independent broadcast news organization that is financed and sponsored by you through your help and donations on wearechange.org. Now, I needed to say that before getting into the next subject of this video, which of course will be a very light topic, and that of course is the diabolical, evil plot by the bloodthirsty globalists to start a war with the help of the mainstream media. More concisely, we're going to be talking about Trump's new Afghanistan plan, the internal battles between Kushner and Steve Bannon, and how one of the most influential person when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, Henry Kissinger, and his brazenest comments that ultimately support ISIS. Now, a few days ago, I tweeted that, quote, Trump is surrounded more and more by generals, military contractors, and Goldman Sachs. I would not be surprised if he starts a war soon. And some of the latest developments and actions by our President Donald Trump show that this is becoming more and more likely. We're getting alleged information from inside the White House that it was Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump's daughter, and her husband, Jared Kushner, that were the reason that Donald Trump's chief strategist, Steve Bannon, was removed from the White House. Now, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump's husband, has been very instrumental inside of Donald Trump's White House. He has business ties to George Soros and Goldman Sachs. He's the same Jared Kushner that actually called Lockheed Martin in order to get Saudi Arabia a better weapons deal. And if you remember a few weeks ago, it was Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump that actually persuaded their father, Donald Trump, to launch a military strike on the Syrian government that was fighting ISIS because, quote, Ivanka watched a video of children suffering inside of Syria. We're hearing initial reports that Steve Bannon actually called Jared Kushner a cuck and a globalist. And ever since the recent ouster of Steve Bannon, many commentators and analysts are saying that this is a major win for the globalists. And now finally, a lot more people are concerned about the globalist influence within Trump's administration, which is something that we have been talking about on this broadcast ever since the beginning of Trump's administration that we have been warning you about. And now it's becoming true. Ever since we've seen the ouster of Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former chief strategist, we are seeing a more aggressive, a more militarized, a more war hawkish stance by the Trump administration, which is extremely worrying. I mean, just today, Donald Trump's administration just slapped sanctions on China and Russia so they could allegedly put pressure on North Korea. And this is a very significant move since many people consider sanctions a form of economic warfare on the country. And now with the United States becoming more aggressive after Russia and China, seeing comments from inside of the White House saying that they need a preemptive war with North Korea to supposedly stop a war. And these later developments that we're going to get into right now clearly should demonstrate to everyone that the President of the United States does not represent the people of this country, but a small number of individuals who are actually pulling the strings. And this, of course, leads to the major announcement that Donald Trump just made a few hours ago about his latest actions when it comes to Afghanistan. And what was Donald Trump's major decision on Afghanistan? You know, the man who previously said, quote, that he agreed with President Obama in 2013 on Afghanistan that, quote, we should have a speedy withdrawal. Why should we keep wasting our money? Rebuild the USA. Donald Trump also previously said, quote, Ron Paul is right when he says we are wasting lives and money in Iraq and Afghanistan. He said, quote, we have wasted an enormous amount of blood and treasure in Afghanistan. Their government has zero appreciation. Let's get out. What did the man who promised to be a non-interventionist, to promise to pull back troops away from Afghanistan, what did he do? Well, he totally flip-flopped. He made the same excuses as his predecessor did, Barack Obama, when it came to his flip-flop and broken promises of bringing our troops home 2 years ago. He agreed on sending 4,000 more troops to Afghanistan, and, what a shocker, gave no timeline for withdrawal. And it's extremely frustrating because this makes no sense at all unless you look at the story that the media and government are not telling you. The United States has already spent over $1 trillion on Afghanistan. 3,559 Americans have been killed there. 20,049 U.S. soldiers have been wounded there, to what has already been the longest conflict that the United States has ever been involved in. 16 years and counting, and a lot more under U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, let's look at some of the contributing factors to why this is still happening. And, of course, it's not to fight terrorism. Because if you look at Afghanistan, when the Taliban were in charge before the U.S. invasion, they were able to almost completely wipe out poppy and heroin production in that country in just about 1 year. Ever since the United States invaded almost 16 years ago, Afghanistan is now a narco state run by radical Islamic jihadists and drug lords that now, according to the United Nations, provide 90% of the world's opium supply. You know, just one of the most addictive drugs in existence. Afghanistan is also highly rich in natural resources. Very hard to find rare metals that help run your computers and your cell phones. Now, of course, people like McMaster, Lindsey Graham, and John McCain are celebrating this announcement by Donald Trump, which is ultimately a continuation of the same policy that was committed by Bush and Obama before him. The mainstream media is cheering him on and have literally stopped barraging him with all these senseless attacks to congratulate him on his bold new action plan against Afghanistan, which is the same plan that we had ever since 2001. And I'm the conspiracy theorist here. People need to realize Donald Trump has just shifted towards a total neocon. He's continuing the same policies that never change, no matter who is president. And we all need to wake up to that and stop being naive. And it's not just drugs and natural resources that the U.S. empire is after, but also global hegemony. And a big part of the new Afghanistan deal that Donald Trump proposed to everyone has a lot to do with Iran. As we know, Israel and the United States have mainly aligned themselves with Saudi Arabia, the Wahhabis, the pushers of radical Islamic terrorists, over Iran. And it's been Saudi Arabia and Iran that control the majority of the oil within the Middle East that are fighting each other and have always been in conflict with each other. One of the reasons the U.S. empire is leaving troops inside of Afghanistan is to make sure Iran doesn't gain influence over Afghanistan. Already, Iran is fighting drug lords and radical Islamic terrorists on the Afghanistan border that it shares its country with. You know, just a 90% increase of the world's opium supply that crosses through their border. And as we have learned from Henry Kissinger's own admission that he himself would rather have ISIS and radical Islamic terrorists around than have Iran as an influential member state inside of the Middle East. This is one of the most influential American foreign policy advisors, a major globalist intertangled within secret societies within our establishment, who advises Donald Trump, who Donald Trump says he respects dearly and has meetings with, that says and is telling Trump not to destroy ISIS, because then Iran would become a more powerful state in the Middle East. And if we look at American foreign policy, especially before, we have seen the American empire arm, fund, protect ISIS itself, radical Islamic terrorists, in order to get rid of nation states inside of the Middle East. Iran is literally one of the countries that is fighting against ISIS and the radical Islamic terrorists. And this policy is extremely flawed and wrong, and directly contradicts the real reason why we officially went into Afghanistan in 2011 and continue to be so till now. And that, of course, is the myth of fighting terrorism, which is absolute crap, which is not being told to you because there's bigger geopolitical stakes here that are far more corrosive to the American people than you could ever imagine. But they are very beneficial to Goldman Sachs and the military contractors and military generals that are all around Donald Trump right now. And these policies are stupid and won't change, even though Donald Trump said he would change them before. It will eventually lead to the decline of the U.S. empire and destruction of our nation state. So yeah, that's what's happening from my perspective. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comment section below. I want to thank everyone who donates. You're more important than ever before. And if you can, every last cent matters to us on wearechange.org/donate.
We Are Change, wearechange.org, We Are Change on YouTube. Check them out, subscribe, and support We Are Change. Now, like I said, that I think he doesn't have anybody that thinks the way he does around him. I think his daughter, and especially Jared Kushner, are really a hindrance to not being elitist or, doing exactly what the elites want done. I think as a father, he needs to realize that his daughter's a trendy. Jared Kushner wants to fit in with everybody, and make a future. And he believes that, well, the Democrats are the ones that are probably going to be in charge, so I need to make them happy. And my daddy-in-law, he's the president, so if I can get him to do things, they'll go, yeah, that's the guy we want on our side. I could be wrong, but I think that there's a lot to that. As we go forward, I think that we're going to see Trump get extremely frustrated. He's not going to have people around that are going to get things done the way he wants them done. They're going to promise him everything. And then on top of it, I don't think Congress is going to work with him. And this could actually become even more of a problem. But I think that they would like it that way, because they might be able to impeach him, get him out of office. I think that they've been trying to do that for a long time now, from day one. And to destabilize America is going to allow a large divide and will put a big scar over Trump's presidency. Now, if we're going to go forward and actually make change, I think that the constitutionalists, the libertarians, and the true small government conservatives are going to have to step up. Not just in time for the 2020 election. I'm talking about now. And the only way that's going to be able to happen is all of those groups are going to have to focus on the things that they can agree on. Because we know the libertarians, the constitutionalists, the small government conservatives, we all have a different way of living. And even when you define it in that group, that's pretty broad definement. Because within each one of those groups, it's very individualized. So we know that we're not going to agree on lifestyle choices. But what we can agree on is things that limit government control over our personal life. And we need to call out the left and the right and call them out loud and hard. And some of the larger voices out there on the radio need to make attempts to reach out to Trump. I am going to move on, but I do want to read this one article here. This from Reason.com. And this kind of has to do with, all the protests, Trump didn't call him out by name the first time, and, all the BS. Again, Reason.com. Is there really an insidious libertarian to alt-right pipeline? No, but believers in free minds and free markets should be in the forefront of attacking racism, anti-Semitism, and I can't even pronounce it right. It says libertarianism has an alt-right problem, writes Matt Lewis over at the Daily Beast. It seems observably true that libertarianism is disproportionately a gateway drug to the alt-right. He notes that a number of high-profile leaders of the alt-right, Milo Yiannopoulos, Richard Spencer, Christopher Cantwell, among others, either flirted with or explicitly identified as libertarian at some point in their stumbledom toward anti-Semitism, white supremacism, reactionary sexism, and or neo-Nazism. For instance, Cantwell, who can barely complete a sentence or a crying jag without slagging the Jews, was part of the Free State Project before he rightly got bounced after advocating the indiscriminate killing of government agents. Milo flirted with the term too before concluding that libertarians are children, obsessed with weed, Bitcoin, and hacking. Richard Spencer apparently attended Reason's 2007 very secular Christmas party, at which Christopher Hitchens led a sing-along of Tom Larry's Christmas song. I organized that event, which drew a couple of hundred people, but I had no idea that such a future thug was among the crowd. Lewis notes that libertarianism and the alt-right tend to non-interventionism when it comes to foreign policy, and that libertarianism is somewhat unique in its unflinching support of free speech. In some cases, this free speech is unsavory. If you are anti-political correctness, libertarianism might seem like a good place to land, even if you don't buy into the whole libertarian philosophy. Along the same lines, libertarians mostly believe that private actors have a right of association that would allow businesses to refuse customers even for racist, homophobic, or sexist reasons. That is no way an endorsement of such behavior, but it clearly creates space for alt-right haters to catch their bated breath. Lewis's article, in which I appear more on in a moment, builds on a recent post at Hot Air by Tyler Millard, a libertarian contributor to that conservative site. Millard argues that the loose coalition of libertarians and conservatives needs to purge white supremacist leaders' ideology from our midst. The problem is these Richard Spencers and Peter Brimlows, the founder of the racist site BDare.com, who wrote anti-immigration articles for National Review in the 90s, got their start in the movement under the guise of paleoconservatism, while others are part of the Hans Hermann Hope block of libertarianism. They are the wolves in sheep clothing, looking to draw more and more people into their pack while ripping away the foundation of freedom and liberty at the same time. So there is definitely some mingling going on, but does any of this add up to a pipeline? I don't think so, for reasons I explained to Lewis. These people may start off calling themselves libertarian. Drink here. But they are the anti-thesis of everything that the Libertarian Project stands for, which is cosmopolitanism versus parochialism, individualism versus group identity, and libertarianism or autonomy versus authoritarianism. Nick Gillespie, editor-in-chief of Reason.com, tells me this affinity for libertarianism wears off when they realize that we are principled, that no, we're not just trolling, says Gillespie. The Cato Institute's David Boaz reminds Lewis that Jason Kessler, the organizer of the fascistic and deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, was originally a member of the Occupy movement. While granting that some libertarians become conservatives, some become welfarist liberals, a few drift into creepy extremes, and Lewis himself admits that many of today's alt-righters are disaffected conservatives, so it's an overstatement at the very least to characterize the alt-right as mostly former libertarians. Yet there is no question that some elements in the broadly defined libertarian movement articulate policy positions almost indistinguishably from those of the alt-right and Donald Trump. This is especially true when it comes to issues such as immigration. From Lewis's story, on a post-Charlottesville blog post, Cantwell discussed his conversation from libertarianism to alt-right as immigration became a leading news story in America and Europe. He writes, Lou Rockwell gave a talk titled Open Borders Are an Assault on Private Property. From here, I decided to read Hans Hermann Hope's Democracy, the God That Failed. From these, I realized that the libertine vision of a free society was quite distorted. The society we saw actually would provide far more order and control than would modern democratic governments. It would encourage more socially conservative behavior and less compulsory association. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, I was once again reminded of my naivety. I told Lewis that Ron Paul's high-profile presidential runs in 2008 and 12 played a role too. When I started at Reason in the fall of '93, I'd said that most people came to libertarianism via exposure to some mix of Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman, along with some Robert Heinlein, some Hayek, and Rothbard, and institutions such as Cato, the Foundation for Economic Education, the Institute for Humane Studies, and Reason. Over the past decade or so, there's no question in my mind that Dr. No is probably more responsible than any individual for raising libertarianism's visibility and reach. In a way, Ron Paul is the guy who lit the fuse, Nick Gillespie says, and he embodies some of those contradictions between libertarianism and the alt-right. Gillespie tells me that Richard Spencer came up to him at the Republican National Convention in 2016 and said that he was activated into politics because of Paul. Gillespie sees Paul's legacy as very mixed, as someone who was simultaneously posting this very libertarian worldview, but then he also speaking to people's fears and anxieties. If one were looking for the missing link to explain this phenomenon, Ron Paul and his paleo-libertarian allies would be a good place to start. Paul really did simultaneously embody an attractive idealistic version of libertarianism and an appeal to populist paranoia that is very evident in alt-right fears about porous borders, encroaching Sharia law, and foreign control of America's economic and cultural life. As Brian Daltrey reported in 2008, Paul was packing college auditoriums with a basic stump speech that went something like this. He wraps up the speech with 3 things he doesn't want to do that sum up the Ron Paul message. First, I don't want to run your life. We all have different values. I would know how to do it, or I wouldn't know how to do it. I don't have the authority under the Constitution, and I don't have the moral right. Second, I don't want to run the economy. People run the economy in a free society. And third, I don't want to run the world. We don't need to be imposing ourselves around the world. Paul does not mention abortion or immigration, areas where his views are more conventionally conservative and not of great appeal to this age group. He's against abortion and thinks the fetus is a human life deserving of state protection, but he also thinks that, like all such crimes against persons, abortion is a matter for states to decide without federal interference. He thinks that border defense is a legitimate function of government and that government has been doing a bad job of it. He wants tougher border enforcement, including a border wall. He wants to eliminate birthright citizenship, and he wants to end the public subsidies that might attract illegal immigrants. Paul's style of libertarianism includes a populist streak of distrust for foreign forces overwhelming our sovereignty, whether through the United Nations, international trade pacts, immigration, or a feared North American union between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. If you bleach out the libertarian aspects of Ron Paul's 2008 stump speech, you're pretty much left with the agenda pushed by Donald Trump and the alt-right, both of which seem comfortable with a welfare state as long as that welfare is going to the right kind of people. Paul also issues this sort of Make America Great Again rhetoric, which undergirds Trump's and the alt-right's fetish of masculine virtues and an overbuilt military. You can read the rest of that article at reason.com. And I see where they're going with that part of it with Ron Paul, but you also have to really focus on where we are as a world right now. And if we tried to just get rid of the federal government right off the bat, have you seen a lot of these people on the left that are out protesting? Have you tried to talk to someone that is really brainwashed hard left? You can't bring up any facts. They don't care. The moment you start bringing up facts, you're just one of those racist or these people are brainwashed. And the crazy thing is because they have no actual argument, they tend to automatically turn to violence. They get angry because they don't have the information that they believe they need, because a lot of times it doesn't exist. So they automatically get angry, and then they want to act out. Do you think that we wouldn't be susceptible to a vacuum? Like I said, I'm a libertarian first, but I do understand a path back to more of a constitutional state. I think if we got to that point, if society would run with the free market, the freedom, the free association, and allow states to be created or evil, once they start abridging someone's right, that's when the federal government would be able to step in. But we do need pockets of experiments for society to operate in a free way. And I think that a path towards constitutional will give the ability for us to go towards a more libertarian society, but it can also go the other way like it has so far. We could get there and then future generations start going back towards where we are now. But there's still been a progression. Even though we've lost a lot of freedoms, there are certain people that have now been able to enjoy those freedoms that they should have had in the first place. People of, African American race, or if you don't like that term, black, you have people from Asia, Native Americans. All these groups are protesting for the most part. But we have progressed as far. But I feel that because we don't celebrate how far we've gotten, that there is a lot of focus on, well, I should have more of this. I should have more of that. Without saying, hey, how about we get government out of the way so you can express those things, so you can create your business, so you can prosper. They forget that government has created the problem. They're not going to solve it for you. Plus, they have a very screwed up view of history. They have been brainwashed. And right now, I've heard this from multiple people. We really even shouldn't be worrying about ourselves right now when it comes to all these, what was described to me as childish bickering amongst Americans, because everybody feels comfortable doing the childish bickering. They're not talking about, I'm homeless. I'm living out of my car. This is, we need separate bathrooms. We should, have black only this, or, we have all these different groups. Oh, we should bring in communism because capitalism has failed, even though we haven't had capitalism for hundreds of years. What I've been told and have also read from many different sources is that we have a bubble about to pop. And the bubble started under Obama. We've had a lot of false hope, basically. The stock market keeps going up. And people are like, well, how did that start under Obama? It started under Obama because of bailing out the banks, subsidies that were given. So no one was punished for doing business the wrong way. So after Trump gets in all this, hope in the business arena, stock markets just keep going up and up and hitting all these records. While even though people are being hired because, again, people are hoping, the global economy is kind of suffering right now. And is this, pushed by the Wall Street and the president trying to hopefully, inspire business in America again, going to turn this around, because we know global debt and global commerce is all interconnected. I don't know if it will. But we can always cross our fingers, but I would definitely say prepare that it doesn't. I'm going to play this short clip here. So like 8 minutes or so. This from Stefan Molyneux, Global Debt Crisis, Prepare Yourself Accordingly.
Hey everybody, Stefan Molyneux from Peter Main Radio. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to your daily argument. Today I'm going to offer up to you the true fiscal kryptonite that tends to stop leftists and social justice warriors in their tracks, because they have all of these mad utopian schemes involving infinite imaginary money. And one of the ways that you can stop this madness in its tracks is simply to say, okay, how's the debt going to be paid off? How is the deficit going to be closed? And no, don't listen to them talk about just this magical tax, like these airborne vampires you can release to suck the jugulars of the rich and enrich everyone else. Won't work. Won't even. You could tax all the rich in the world at 100%. It would cover little more than a couple of days of deficit spending. So how is it going to be paid off? Because this is what's happening in the West, for sure. It's actually happening in the Middle Eastern countries as well, in the OPEC countries. The OPEC countries have been funding their societies, which, basically hang off oil revenues after they stole all of the oil companies from the West after the Second World War. But the oil-producing countries in the Middle East have been subsidizing all of their social engineering and socialism with debt, which is not good, obviously, fundamentally. Next up, Venezuela, but with additional ideologies. And in America, debt has been how everything is fueled these days. Debt has been what has wallpapered over the supposed recovery after the 07-08 housing crash, and Americans are now saving less than they have at any time except right before the 07-08 crash. And this is really, really bad. People are that their real incomes are stagnating or declining. Their costs, particularly under Obamacare, are going up. I've read reports now people are paying more for healthcare insurance than for their mortgage. And I guess then they'll hope to get sick and live at the hospital. That's their housing option. It's absolutely terrible. And this debt is something that is kind of invisible to most people. It is another one of these IQ tests. Figure out who's actually worth talking to and who is just making, self-satisfying virtue signaling noises with their yappy holes. Just ask people, okay, how's the debt going to be paid off? What is the debt at? What is the unfunded liabilities? Just in the United States, well north of $150 trillion or close to a little bit less than 10 times GDP. If you look at the world as a whole, this came out relatively recently, global debt is $217 trillion. Well, more by now. This is a little bit old. $217 trillion. That is 327% of global GDP. And this just went up $50 trillion over the last decade. And that is complete madness. So you can't possibly sustain any of this. Look at U.S. debt, right? Since the Federal Reserve, since fiat currency, type whatever you want into your own bank account and run them printing presses as long as you can buy votes with them. Since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, American national debt, U.S. national debt, has increased 5,000 times. I shouldn't laugh, but it's like, why not 10,000? What's the matter with you? Don't you have any ambition? Don't you have any scope? Don't you have any vision? Why not 100,000? Why not 1 trillion? I mean, it's complete madness. And this, of course, is going on in the European Union as well, which is one of the reasons why Brexit was a good idea, should it ever come to pass. But the European Central Bank has stepped in to halt the basic economic collapses of Spain and Italy and a bunch of other countries. They're propping up a bunch of zombie companies with all of this low interest rates and money printing and so on. And this is terrible. And so people who were like, well, we should do this and we should do that and we have single payments, like, how are you going to pay off the debt? How? And I mean, what is there to do with the debt? Well, you can either default, which means you simply declare bankruptcy and you're not going to pay off the debt. That's one solution, which will cause a complete crash of the banking sector and all that, which, as a fairly predatory sector on the jugular of the productive classes, banksters to me are not one of my treasured groups of human beings in the world. In fact, interestingly enough, I was just reading this morning that two interesting developments in the banking sectors, financial sectors. Number one is that artificial intelligence is now out-trading human traders in terms of profitability, which means that, don't think all this automation is just to do with low-rent jobs or minimum wage jobs or menial labor and so on. There's a lot of automation that is coming to higher skilled, higher IQ occupations. And can you imagine, the overhead of having, fullable, often cocaine-addicted and hooker-addicted human beings that you have to pay millions of dollars of bonuses to just to effect your trades, replacing those with AI is so ridiculously efficient that I think this may be the first domino to fall, thus releasing these predatory math geniuses to perhaps go back to building bridges or doing other useful things for humanity. And in Sweden, they are looking at automating the tellers and basically automating all but the most complex customer requirements in banks. It's great. So now even a teller who speaks fluent Swedish and understands the culture, her job or his job is going to vanish. So you know what the best thing to do is? Import a bunch of people who don't speak your language from the third world, because they're just going to fit right into an increasingly automated environment. Madness. So you can either just default, which is to stop paying your debt. Of course, it's a complete crash of the banking system. That's going to be tough. It won't be particularly tough for many individuals because this reset is going to happen one way or another. It will be very tough for banks, though, and it will be very tough for governments because, of course, governments prop up and bail out the banking sector because the banking sector props up and bails out the government, right? It's a mutually dependent addiction to paper money situation. And so that will be tough, but banks won't have access to, mad money, and governments won't have access to credit for a while if governments default. And so that actually have to start living within their means, which means that they're going to have to stop saying no to people who voted for stuff they weren't willing to pay taxes for, right? The boomers. And that's going to be a challenge for people. And I think challenges are fun. I think challenges are interesting. I think challenges are good. And it's still easier than going to war. So for all the people who are going to whine and complain, well, Western men had to go to war many times over the last 100 years. And if other people have to take the brunt for bad fiscal policy, I don't think men are going back to war this time. I think that ship has sailed Dunkirk style. So the other thing you can do, of course, is you can try and print your way out of debt. Just print, print, print. Run the printing presses, create as much money as you want, and then you have to artificially hold down interest rates because, of course, if you print a lot of money, then each dollar becomes worth less, which means that people are going to be paid in the future with dollars that are worth less than now, which means they have to raise interest rates. You have to artificially drive down interest rates, and that's a complete disaster. Then you end up with a Weimar style or Zimbabwe style or French Revolution style hyperinflation, which wipes out the middle class and promotes what's called extremism, which sometimes can just be realism on either side of the political spectrum. And of course, the other thing you can do is struggle to pay off the debt. And that, of course, has become mathematically impossible. Now the debt has soared well north of 100% of GDP in many countries. You simply can't do that as an option. So what's interesting is that in the free market, this problem would be solved, because if people are borrowing too much money, then the pool of capital available to lend diminishes. And as the supply of capital diminishes, the price for capital, which is interest rates, increases, which diminishes people's desire to borrow, right? If you can borrow at 3%, lots of people are going to borrow. If the interest rates go to 9 or 10 or 15%, then fewer people are going to borrow. So the market regulates itself beautifully if it's allowed to function. Of course, the whole point of government is they won't allow the market to function, because when the market functions, government power is reduced, and government is seen as a predatory overhead on human productivity for the most part. And so that's a beautiful thing that the free market does, is regulate the relationship between saving and spending through interest rates in particular, right? If people are saving too much money and not spending, then interest rates are going to go down for lending because there's an excess of capital to lend. And that's great, because that stimulates the economy in the here and now. You don't need some Federal Reserve or something like that to keep the economy functioning at an even keel. Just let the market do its job. But they've cut this all off. All of the interest rate signals that are supposed to regulate the market have been destroyed by central banking. Like 99.9% of people live in a world that's covered by a central bank. And you remember the old rock, paper, scissors game? I think the best way to understand it is to think, the Earth is a big rock. And if you remember how the game works, you've got rock, and fiat currency is paper, and paper covers rock. Paper crushes rock. That is the way of fiat currency. It is a harsh lesson to learn, but we'll get through it, and we'll be far more sober and wise on the other side. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. Stefan Molyneux, Free Domain Radio.
Stefan Molyneux on YouTube. Check him out. Subscribe. Now, we've already been on this path. We've been on this path that we keep printing and printing and printing. And you see the effect. You see the effect from the 90s to now. And people think, oh, the gas prices, that has to do with, oil. Price of oil. Well, where do you think that price of oil fluctuates? Part of it's due to what's the value of the U.S. dollar? How many of those do I need? And the value, the more they print, continues to go down. It's not just, the oil. No, look at gas prices. Look at car prices. Look at home prices. All that's a reflection of your money, your dollar being devalued. So it takes more. Your property didn't gain value just because it's sat there. You might get more value out of it when you update it, but are you really getting more value when updating it at today's prices? Is so much more than it would have been when you first bought the place, but it would be outdated by now. Therefore, you've got to spend that inflated price, and do you really get that value out of it when you sell? You might get a little bit, but it's not a significant amount. Not with the inflation, not when it takes so many dollars to buy things. You know, we were talking about truck prices the other day, just how crazy it's gotten. You know, baseline truck, you know, for 45,000, really nice, fully loaded truck going for almost, you know, a home price. It's literally getting out of control. um, I want to read this article here from Reason.com. Trump versus the business community. Obama was not the friend CEOs think the president of the U.S. should be, but in Trump, they're finding out what it's like to have a real enemy. Most business executives fumed and groused for the 8 years Barack Obama was in the White House. He was a former community organizer who had never met a payroll, and those in the corporate boardrooms thought he was no friend of free enterprise. 2010 New York real estate and media tycoon Mortimer Zuckerman said Obama's demonization of business was discouraging investment, sapping job growth, and generally creating an economic Katrina. Gary Shapiro, head of the Consumer Technology Association, called Obama the most anti-business president in his lifetime. Former General Electric chairman Jack White implored the president, "Stop it! You can't go industry by industry through intimidation, business by business by business." As ordeals go, though, theirs was notably mild. The stock market soared, corporate profits nearly tripled, and the unemployment rate declined from 7.8 to 4.8. From the depths of the Great Recession, the economy began what is now the third longest expansion on record. When it came to the economy, the Obama years looked more like Mardi Gras than Hurricane Katrina. Now, instead of a liberal lawyer in the White House, CEOs have one of their own, and they're finding it's not everything they hoped. The stock market and other economic indicators look about the same as they did before Donald Trump took office. In Obama's final 6 months, the economy added an average of nearly 181 jobs per month. In Trump's first 6 months, it added 179 per month. GDP growth has never slowed a bit. More troublesome at the moment is Trump's insistence on defending Confederate monuments and stoking white racial resentments. In recent days, so many CEOs resigned from the president's 2 business advisory councils that Trump closed them down. Some of the executives, no doubt, were genuinely upset at the president's coddling of bigots and his inability to behave with a dignity befitting his office. Some were fearful of alienating customers who find Trump toxic. Other business executives are edging away from the president as though he were an erratic panhandler, and for the same reason, best not to be close to him if he flips out. You don't want to have to stand there in silent mortification, as White House Chief of Staff John Kelly had to do the other day. While the president makes a fool of himself on national TV, it would not be good for your company or your career. But even before Trump's Charlottesville debacle, he was not covering himself with capitalist glory. His January travel order put him at odds with some 100 tech firms that sued to block it, arguing it disrupts ongoing business operations. And it threatens companies' ability to attract talent, business, and investment to the United States. His decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord didn't go down well with many big companies, 25 of which had signed a letter urging him to stay in. Even oil giants ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips opposed the withdrawal and abandoning the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal. Trump spurned the recommendation of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's insistence on renegotiating NAFTA has the big three automakers worried about their supply chains. Well, maybe a lot of them probably should have kept factories here. Then you wouldn't have to worry about supply chains. Because if it's not America, it could be the other country. And, well, automakers in, I think it was Brazil, I think should have already learned that because they had all their stuff seized. Or was that Venezuela? I can't remember now. But yeah, they had their stuff seized by other governments. So he's not doing that. He's saying bring it back. A lot of the arguments by these extreme large corporations are that they can't do stuff as cheap as they want and make the big profits that they want. But that's okay. Because we know a lot of those profits are inflated by helping get laws passed that regulate other companies from overtaking you. Hence why we're seeing a lot of places where there's not a lot of stores anymore. Why? Because a lot of them went out of business. Back to the article here. A lot of executives applaud Trump's war on federal regulation, but what else has he done for them? His failures on Obamacare have generated uncertainty among insurance companies and healthcare providers, which I think they're a big sham anyways. His sour relations with Congress make tax reform less plausible every day. They don't want to pass anything he wants to do, so that's not a big deal. That's what we're seeing all the time. Infrastructure is what he was supposed to focus on Tuesday when he appeared before reporters at Trump Tower, but he buried that issue by venting about Charlottesville. Actually, the reporters were the one that started hassling him about Charlottesville. So they buried the issue. Perhaps worst of all, he has been the arrogant bully that Jack Welch and others accused Obama of being. Trump slammed Boeing over the cost of Air Force One. He blasted Ford over the plane factory in Mexico. He has repeatedly attacked Amazon.com CEO Jeff Bezos, who also owns the Washington Post. He went after Nordstrom for dropping his daughter's products. When Merck's Kenneth Frazier quit his manufacturing advisory group Monday, Trump blamed him for rip-off drug prices. His recurring message is that any executive who doesn't do as Trump wishes can expect retribution from the most powerful man on earth. Obama was not the friend CEOs think the president of the United States should be, but in Trump, they're finding out what it is like to have a real enemy. And Again, that's from Reason.com. Check it out. Sorry, my mouth is just dry today. You know, a lot of problems we're seeing is exactly what I warn people about. I've seen libertarians and constitutionalists vote for this guy. I've said he's not a freedom lover. He just wants power the way he wants it. He wants the power. He wants it his way. That's who Trump is. That's what you got. Now, some of the arguments in this article don't really, ring as, oh, that's a bad thing. But some of them do. But I think what we're looking at globally is going to be more of an effect on us than anything. Because not only do we have all these other things going on internally, but when you look at the world as a whole, there's a lot of uncertainty. We've already had all these other countries that no longer, trusted America. We have countries that now hate America, if they really ever liked us, but now there's anger towards America. And then you also have the uncertainty of the petrodollar with everything going on. Global debt that is astronomical. Will we be able to survive it? I think the America that we're going to see in the next 10 to 15 years is going to be unrecognizable and completely unrealistic if if we were back in the 90s. What we have now is almost unrealistic. But what we will see in the next 10 to 15 years, I think, is not going to be a America you could even closely recognize. Maybe I'll be wrong, but it seems that we're headed that way, and I really actually hope that I'm proven wrong. I don't want to be right about this. Now, let's see how much time we got here. Okay, I should be able to cover this. I can't remember if I played this already, but I do want to. Actually, I think no. Okay, cool. This is a short clip here from We Are Change. I just kind of wanted to cover this a little bit. Spotting fake news.
Jason Burmis here, reporting for wearechange.org. And today I wanted to take a look at fake news. Now, first of all, let's define what that term really means. I would contend that this term encompasses all media outlets, no matter how large or small, that would purposely put out disinformation or spin. Now, that's not to say that every media outlet is going to get it right all the time. Obviously, mistakes will be made, and honest ones at that. But in this day and age, there is just so much fake news, big and small, out there. That's why I'm going to start with the mainstream media first. CNN, amongst others, have really been exposed as fake news by larger alternative media sites.
Might have been an explosion of cloud. The white say.
Now, this is a good thing, but for those who have looked into this subject matter, it's nothing new. You know, Project Mockingbird, the CIA's infiltration into the media, into Hollywood, is well documented. It's fact. It's something we've known for a long time.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
Now, on the other hand, this atmosphere has created websites that just downright tell you disinformation based in no fact whatsoever. And again, you could argue that the mainstream media has used and continues to use this practice. However, when I see headlines of former CIA agents saying that they blew up World Trade Center Building 7 that have no basis in fact whatsoever, I also get concerned because I see these being represented as fact and shared on social media rapidly. Another trend we've seen growing and growing and growing and growing over the years is the fact that every time a celebrity dies, well, it was the Illuminati. And now that trend has seemed to encompass the Pizzagate or Pedogate conspiracy. Well, folks, how are we ever going to get people to look at the legitimate information that's out there if we can't tell the truth? Now, don't get me wrong. I believe a lot of this stuff is intentionally put out there so people won't look into some of the factual information that we here at wearechange.org try to put out there. However, there are those people that are just trying to get hits and are willing to say anything to bolster their website. Now, unfortunately, we also live in a day and age where some of the alternative media seem to be cheerleaders for the Trump administration. Although the Trump administration has done some great things, they've gotten us out of the Paris Climate Accords. The economy is doing very, very well. They're trying to get rid of Obamacare. There is merit in this administration. However, to ignore the fact that Goldman Sachs is heavily represented in this administration, to ignore the fact that his technology advisor, Peter Thiel, sits on the board of Bilderberg, to ignore the fact that he's dealing with Saudi Arabia, who we know have been arming Islamic jihadis for some time now, and spin that as though that's not happening is very dangerous as well. So we have to look at the big picture, folks. We have to remember that there really is no right or left. There is only right and wrong. In the end, all of these things are fake news. And in the end, all of these things are nothing more than lies. As human beings, we've been given the gift of free will, discernment, and communication. So what I believe we need to do is reach out to each other with factual information and the truth. And through that, we can empower humanity and become better as one people. As always, if you like this video, please subscribe, share on social media, and go visit wearechange.org. It's only through your financial support that videos like this one are possible.
wearechange.org and We Are Change on YouTube. Check them out, subscribe, support. Now, when you look at fake news, it's one thing to question something. It's another thing to present something that is extreme theory as fact. And we have a lot of that. You know, could a superstar's death be linked to the Illuminati? I don't know. There's no fact. And you know, they'll be like, well, look at the cop in the video when they take the body out. That guy looks similar to this guy, and see, this guy took a picture in front of a pyramid, and he also, you know, he's got a picture on his profile with him covering one eye. So the Illuminati killed that person. Like, not believing that doesn't mean that I won't go, hey, you know, some Illuminati could have killed this person. I don't know. Shoot. Doubt it. Probably, you know, whatever happened. I don't know. Oh, they knew something. Every celebrity knows something, except we call them idiots when we hear some of them speak because they're pretty unintelligent. Not saying all, but we know that. There's some pretty loopy, uneducated stars out there. So you really, you look at the internet today, it just amazes me. I go on Facebook and it's just, it's crazy, you know, the flat earthers and the lizard people, every contrail is a chemtrail. And I do believe that they're up there spraying stuff in the upper atmosphere, doing all kinds of testing. I'm sure the stuff they're spraying isn't exactly healthy for humans, plants, or animals. I believe they've done tests going, you know, it might shave a year off their life or 2 years off their life, or hopefully it doesn't do the worst that it could do and give them cancer. You know, it'll shorten their life by 10 years, 20 years. I think there's testing going on. We've seen enough historical documents and footage and pictures. We know what governments and countries and corporations have done. We know that they test, and well, yep, that turned out to be bad. We can't test bad things on you. Well, what happens when they don't know if it's bad until after they've tested you? In ways I think Mark Twain said it the best, you know, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. We might not be going full eugenics, but we've made Planned Parenthood a staple. We hear talk about mandatory vaccinations and stuff like that. It might not be exactly the same. They might not be going, hey, you know, we're going to sterilize you, or, you know, you need to come and take the shot because you're not that smart. Don't worry, we're here to help you. Now they're saying you might get the flu. Come and get your shot. We don't know the facts about things. Could be a theory would be that there's this covert, you know, operation to sterilize a certain number of the population. Facts show that people that have been in power in America have practiced eugenics. Some of those people are still in positions of power. Some of the kids that were taught this type of thought by those same people that did things like this are now in positions of power that have links to vaccines. So now you know the facts. You make your own decision about it. One person might go, yeah, I don't trust that. I'm not getting a vaccine. Another person might be like, I'm not, judging that person for what their parents did. And, I think that they're trying to do good. I'm going to go get that vaccine. A choice. And neither person's wrong. Again, it's a choice. Knowing the facts that we know and going with your instinct. That's what's supposed to make a free society free, is the ability to do that. So we shouldn't go back. Because what if someone goes, I think vaccines are real bad. I'm in power now, and I'm going to shut down vaccine production in America because I think it's evil. That's the wrong choice, too, because they might be doing some good. Me, personally, I don't trust them. But, again, that's a choice. And we need to preserve our freedom of choice. If we don't do it, it will be lost to every future generation. Because that means that we allowed history and present to rhyme. But again, it's really going to be up to us, and I think we are in a situation where the libertarians, the small government conservatives, the constitutionalists really all need to come together. Even, some of the stuff that the Green Party, talks about is things that libertarians and small government people could agree on. We have to come together now or almost never. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Stay tuned here on UCY.TV for great broadcasts coming up after this. And don't forget to go to UCY.TV. Scroll down the bottom, click the Amazon button. Shop Amazon through UCY, and we get a little kickback to help cover operating costs. And you get the same great prices and same great shipping rate. And don't forget, check out My Patriot Supply, antityrannynews.com/MyPatriot. Same great deals, same great shipping rate, and we get a little kickback to help cover our operating costs on our end. And again, thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Great broadcast coming up after this, and I will hopefully catch you Friday. It's up to us to continue on the idea of freedom. It's up to you.